think I started recording my lessons with Ed Barker my senior year. I didn't have a smartphone for my undergrad. I think it's like a graduation gift. My parents got me a smartphone, and then I could start, recording and stuff a lot easier. But up until then, I would just do like photo booth on my like old Mac laptop. So just the huge files, and I still have the laptop like buried because I don't want to lose the files. But
yeah,
it's like figuring it out. I remember he would tell me stories of when he was in college trying to just record his practice. I don't even remember the name of the device. Something kind of like a vinyl to record yourself. It was like carrying it up the stairs to record his practice. Yeah.
I had a great time chatting with today's guest. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are talking with Christian Gray. And Nina DeCesar, who's been on the podcast a couple times before, she recommended that I reach out to Christian. We had a wonderful conversation. He joined the double bass section of the Kennedy Center Opera House Orchestra at the start of the 2017-2018 season. So he was in the orchestra. He's been in the orchestra during the pandemic. We talk about that. We talk about what it's like playing in an opera orchestra, preparing for an opera orchestra audition, his prep for the Sphinx Competition. He won one of the title prizes for that in 2021. Much more. Super cool person. I know you're going to enjoy this chat. Quick shout out to our sponsors, Upton Bass, Dorico, and Ear Trumpet Labs. More on them later. But let's get into this conversation with Christian Gray. Are you in DC or the DC area right now? Or
yeah, I'm in the district. I actually just moved like a week ago from like Arlington, Virginia into the district proper. So it's been a little crazy.
Oh,
but,
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Wow. I love DC. It's funny because I live in San Francisco, which is nothing like DC in a lot of ways, but in some ways it is kind of because you're compressed by geography. We're a little peninsula, and I know DC, it's a little bit different, but it's, a fairly dense area. And I think we're even about the same population. It's like a little under. Yeah, I think so. Isn't DC the actual city? It's like around 1 million, maybe a little less, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
It's all very confusing, to be honest, still. It's Washington or DC.
I know. One of my best friends growing up, still keeping regular contact with him, is a cellist named Dan Schomper, and he's done a lot of freelancing. He has played in Fairfax and some of those other gig orchestras, and he moved out to Annapolis maybe, I don't even know, a bunch of years ago, but I come and visit, and it's been interesting kind of like getting the lay of the land. I love it. It's confusing to me, but it seems like a cool place.
I've really enjoyed living here. I've lived here for about 4 years now. I joined the Kennedy Center Opera in the fall of 2017. So it's really been great. Most of my family that lives in the States, they live in North Carolina. Most of my wife's family lives in Massachusetts. So it's the perfect middle ground. And if we want to get out and do hiking, we can do that really easily. But we're in the city. Yeah. Okay. It's a nice place to be.
Yeah, that's a good setup too with your wife's family and your family. Actually, I was, we almost moved to DC a couple of times. My wife was in the finals for the Army band harp, which I think is hilarious that the Army band employs a harpist, but they do, or at least,
right.
They did. And then for medical school, she interviewed at Georgetown, and so we almost and so I definitely like researched the gig scene in DC a couple of times, and man, it was so nice to come out and visit because, DC gets rough in the summer. We're getting
that right now, especially with cicadas this summer. It's intense. Yeah.
Oh, because it's the 17-year cicadas, right? Okay. Yeah. I remember those in Chicago. I don't know if California gets. Well, we'll see. I don't think so, but maybe we do. But I remember coming out in like April or something. It was like the perfect time. It was like cherry blossoms, and coming from Chicago, it's like just mild enough to it feels like a totally much more pleasant world. And so, and you get out into nature so much more quickly, depending on the direction you go. So it seems like a really livable, cool, interesting place.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it here so far.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm so glad Nina thought of connecting us. That's so cool. Where do you know Nina from? Do you know her from Rice or way back?
So I think me and Nina are the same year. We've both been out of school for a while now, but we're kind of the same grade, so to speak.
Right.
I went to Domaine Berger with Nina back I think it was 2009. So yeah, long known her like over 10 years now.
Okay,
So
wow.
yeah, so we've connected at summer festivals, and I think we went to Wabash together at some point during our undergrad. And
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
now she lives like a 40-minute drive away. I think we visited her shortly after you interviewed her.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, get out of town. That's
yeah,
so funny. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, it seems like a great setup for her being back, close to home again. It was fun having her out here on the West Coast. I mean, Portland's not like next door to San Francisco. It's like 700 miles away, but still,
Yeah.
yeah. That's cool. So, how are one of my former students, you may have crossed paths, Ian Hallis. I don't know if you guys.
Yeah.
I figure you've done so many. Okay.
We went to Domain together as well. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no. Okay. So like I've been talking to him about like opera orchestras, like man, pandemics and groups that play indoors, and particularly groups that play indoors with like all these other company, and stagehands and singers. And like, I don't know what's happening here in San Francisco with the opera. I haven't heard any, I'm sure they've got a plan, but like what's the situation in DC or like going into 2021, 22? What are things looking like?
Right. So we are just like receiving news of what next season will be like.
Mm-hmm.
I think our first like full production, full orchestra in the pit, stage crew in the back, that won't happen till May 22, I think. But we're going to try to do like on stage stuff leading up to that. So we're going to start later in the fall, and we have to keep mind of what's happening with COVID and all that. But yeah, we're going to do mostly on stage stuff. I think, arias, and they're going to try to incorporate the orchestra into the actual performance, which is kind of fun. I think since I've been here, I've only been on stage twice, maybe.
I have not been I've visited the Kennedy Center, and I did see the National Symphony play back when Rostropovich was conducting. So that was some disturbingly long time ago, like almost 30 years ago or something like that. But I just have like teenager memories of it. But like, what's the hall like? What's the stage like?
So there's the National Symphony Hall, which is a big grandiose space. The Opera House is actually a little bit more intimate. It still fits a couple thousand people, but I really like the acoustic there, especially in the pit. Mm-hmm. Our section only has 3 bass players, actually. I'm the section bass because the other 2 people are title technically. But we always feel like we can play as quiet as we need to, or since it is 3, we have to produce like a lot of sound a lot of time too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've always felt great in the hall. In the pit, we try to find like our little pocket where our sound can really be boomy and blossom out. Yeah.
Oh, cool. How old is the hall? I mean, you might not know the exact year, but is it like an older hall or newer hall? Or I've only seen the National Symphony, so I haven't been in that hall.
For the specific hall, I'm not entirely sure. I know the Kennedy Center, their 50th anniversary is coming up, so I think probably around.
Oh, so so it was all built at the same time then. So that
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, I'm so ignorant of like it's like I just haven't spent enough time in DC like seeing concerts. It was just like a high school trip. Right. So okay, interesting.
Yeah.
The hall here for San Francisco for the opera was the shared space for the opera and the symphony, and then they split in 1980 when they built the Davies, which is now I guess over 40 years old. But they also, I don't remember how many bases they have, but it might be something similar for the San Francisco Opera.
Really?
I don't remember exactly, but so you've been doing this 4 years, or I guess 3 years plus one very weird year.
Yeah, technically 4, but really 3. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Did you how what's it like playing? And what's so many things we can talk about. This is how these podcasts go. It's just like no structure or anything, but maybe that's good or bad. But what's the season like for the opera, like in terms of weeks and that sort of thing, forgetting that we're in a pandemic, but like normal?
So for this orchestra, it's quite complicated. So we function as the Washington National Opera Orchestra, but also the Kennedy Center Opera House Orchestra. So we have a roughly 30-week season consisting of opera, but then we usually have 7 weeks of ballet and then also musicals. So we do have like a whole variety of stuff, and that kind of makes our season.
Wow.
So it's pretty can be pretty fun actually. So we played Otello for 2 months, and then switched to like Nutcracker, and then we'll do like a musical for 2 weeks or something. And the instrumentation is always changing, and
Okay. Wow.
That's kind of how we stay busy.
Interesting.
I think because of the pandemic, everything's kind of shrunken a little bit as far as scope, and they're hoping to bring it back full force as soon as they can. But
it sounds like that's it's just that the complexity involved with like staged productions, with cast and sets and everything. It's complicated.
You would think like, oh yeah, just get back on. The guidelines are fine, but I guess when you think about all the unions involved too, with the stagehands union, and then the vocalists, and then the choir, especially during COVID, the choirs makes things tough.
This episode is brought to you by Dorico, the advanced music notation software from Steinberg. And one of the features that perplexed me at first, and then I realized its brilliance, is their concept of flows. Here is Daniel Spreadbury, Senior Product Manager, on what flows are and how they work.
The ability to have multiple exercises or multiple songs or whatever, it's so obvious because music is very rarely just one through composed bit from start to end, whether it's a show or a symphony or a sonata or a songbook or whatever. Music's in sections. That's just how it works.
That is how it works, but that's not how most music notation software works. And the ability to break things up like that, oh my goodness. When I'm creating exercises or anything of the sort for my students or any sort of project that I have going, that makes organization so much easier. Exporting is a breeze. Everything that you do in Dorico is beautiful from the get-go, which is really cool coming from other pieces of software. Check them out at Dorico.com. That'll take you to their site on Steinberg's website. And they have a free product called Dorico SE where you can do practically everything that you can in the full version of Dorico for up to 2 parts. That's more than enough if you're doing bass duets or anything of the like. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Dorico. Upton Bass has an interesting philosophy in terms of selling basses to people. Here's Eric of Upton on the topic.
I don't want to sell you one bass. I want to sell you like 4. When you're in high school or college or just starting out, or you just 30 years been playing double bass or electric bass, and now you're about your first double bass. You're starting off with a $2,500 laminate, and then I want you to outgrow it. I want you to come back and say, no, I'm ready for the hybrid. Oh, now I'm ready for the solid wood bass.
Wherever you are on that trajectory, Upton has a bass to meet your needs. Learn more at uptonbass.com, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. Right. Yeah. And it's not like it's different than, we'll just play strings only music. You can kind of come up with ways with like a typical symphony orchestra or more,
Right.
I think it's just more complicated with opera. So, but wow, that's cool that season is that size, and that variety is interesting. The opera orchestra I know the best is Lyric, which is, I don't know what they're up to now. It's somewhere in the 24. It's like half the year you're playing opera, and I know that they were expanding it out and doing a little bit of ballet and doing a couple, but not nearly to the extent. Maybe things have changed since in the last few years, but not nearly to the extent that the Kennedy Center opera. What the name is? The Washington? Is it the Washington National What's the name of the company again?
Washington National Opera.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Wow.
So we actually have like 2 CBAs. One functions as the National Opera, and then the others as the Opera House Orchestra.
Okay.
So I'm still figuring it out. That's something you don't really learn about in the audition process. Contracts and committees and all that kind of behind the scenes stuff.
It's funny. I remember talking to Ira Gold like a long time ago about that. He said it's like you win an audition and it's like stepping through a door, and there's this whole new world and whole new things that you never thought you'd think so much about, and that become like super important. And so what's here's a question I've asked folks that have won a job like relatively recently. Like what this is probably a hard question to answer, but what's something that you have found found the most surprising? Like what if you had told pre-winning this job, Christian, like what's something that would have really surprised, like committees or the importance of having, X number of breaks or what? Like, I don't know, probably a tough question, but.
Off the cuff, I would say that I think when I took this audition, this was actually like my first like professional audition. So, I tried like my absolute best, of course, practice my butt off and all that. But I think in my mind, I felt like the music had to go one specific way or else it was just all for nothing, And maybe that was my training or something at the time, but I just felt like it had to be this specific way. And coming into the job, especially like a pit orchestra, we have to be so flexible all the time that it's actually really important to make sure the music can go in a number of different ways and at any moment. Having that flexibility, even under pressure,
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's true for sure, especially like because you have even more variables in opera, right? Because the singer could hold a note longer or the conductor could be out and the guest conductors. I remember I was subbing in lyric and we were doing, this is going back a while, but we were doing Rosenkavalier. And it was, I just remember sitting in that pit and looking at that clock go like 7:30, 8:30, 9:30, 10:30, 11. And we had the assistant conductor. So Andrew Davies was the conducting, but he was out, and the assistant was conducting, and everything was just a little slower. But you add that up over 4.5 hours, and it was one of those things that if the clock went past midnight, you went into like double, triple, top secret, horrible overtime. Yeah. And so everybody in the pit was like just watching that clock, and we were like in the last few minutes, and it was like 11:58, 11, and that clock went past midnight, and you saw just the whole pit break out in smiles because it was like, it's just incredible what like something like that, and then not only were the musicians getting overtime, but all the stage hands and everybody, and so the variables, especially when you're doing something that goes that long a duration. I thought that was a funny moment.
That is funny. I can think when we did Otello last season before the shutdown, so we did it with 4 basses, but opening night, the big bass solo comes after a really beautiful aria. It's like the most like silky moment in the whole piece. And, it starts with that low E. We come in, but then maybe 3 seconds after we come in, the audience starts applauding the soprano. And like we try for maybe 10 seconds, and the character just waves his arms like, just give up. And we just started it over after the applause.
Yeah, that's like that. Yeah, you're not thinking about that when you're working on that excerpt, right? And the reality of like, oh wait, someone's going to come on stage. The opera orchestra, preparing for an opera audition, I've only taken one. I took a lyric opera audition sometime in the, I don't remember, early 2000s maybe, and just working on that list, which is just a list that typically you don't spend a lot of time on in school, or I didn't certainly. And I remember talking to Ian about this, just like prepping, these bits from rep that and some of that rep, like if you get out Electra and look at the bass part, that's as tricky as anything. Oh, yeah. That's like 9 Heldenlebens in a row or something like that.
Mark would always say that Electra is like Heldenleben for 2 hours.
I remember they were doing a staged version of Electra at the Chicago Symphony back when I was in college, and my teacher Michael Hovnani, he just came in with this part and he just like put it on the stage. He says, check this out, and he's like playing through all these things. We're just thinking like, whoa, he's spending so much time working number 9 from Heldenleben and all the other licks, and he just like how do you approach prepping for that audition? Like it's tricky, right? Because it's not like you're breaking out those excerpts year after year in studio class.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed that aspect. I felt like it evened the playing field a little bit, because I was coming in pretty green to the audition scene, and I knew there are going to be people there who take in 20 auditions, and they understand Brahms 1 better than I did at that point, So it actually helped me a lot just to have more of a clean slate of a list, and just listening to the operas with the score, so a lot of that leading up to it helped me a lot. I feel like just to get such context for what you're playing helps a lot.
Yeah.
Symphonic rep can be a little more abstract with the direct like mood you're going for. With opera, it seems a little more straightforward to me, kind of what atmosphere you want, depending on what's happening on stage.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it? And it's just part of just like the how you fit in with the entire artwork, right? It's just it's different than it's such an interesting job, and it's such a different job from being on stage playing in a more traditional symphony, I think. And there are just so few, at least here in the States or really worldwide, professional opera orchestras, right? I mean, I think I could count on one hand the number of salaried opera orchestras in the country, right? It's like you all, the Met, Chicago Lyric, we got San Francisco Opera, we've got maybe LA, yeah, but and then a few that maybe like are mostly a full-time job. I might be missing a couple, but it's not many, and so it's hard to be like a professional audition taker of opera orchestras because there are just a few, and then a lot of times there's just a few positions, so it's like one comes open every 10 years or something.
Yeah, I can't imagine anyone can reasonably expect to join an opera only. I think most of the people going into those auditions just want any job, first of all. But including myself at the time, just whatever's out there, you go for it. But you're right. I don't think someone like getting ready to take the audition scene can only take opera auditions, or else it'd be too far and few between.
How does the scene? So I've never held any full-time job, but I've spent a lot of time around lyric opera musicians. Like my wife's teacher was the harpist for Chicago Lyric, and I remember just talking to her about how Liz Schifani is her name, how Liz, just what her schedule was like during the season, because a lot of those operas, you're going, I don't know what the start time is for the opera, but a lot of the shows would run almost to midnight, and then you get home, and I don't know if you're like me, but I can't just go to bed after playing like an opera. And so what is that? And I think I was talking with Rex Serrani about just the grind. Maybe the grind is the wrong word for it, but when you're in the season, what's your schedule like? Is that it's got to be pretty intense?
Yeah, especially my first year here, it was a big shift in just like daily behaviors, because you're right, I would get home past midnight sometimes. I mean, there were a couple times I didn't have a car my first year here. I just had to run to the train to catch the last train home, But yeah, I became a night owl, definitely. And, sleeping a little later, staying up later. Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Ear Trumpet Labs. They make hand-built mics out of Portland, Oregon, and they have an excellent mic for upright bass called Nadine. The Nadine is a condenser mic with a clear, natural sound and incredible feedback rejection. This mic is a completely new design. The head mounts in between the strings above the tailpiece with a rubber grommet, and the body securely straps to the tailpiece with Velcro elastic. A 14-inch Mogami cable connects the two parts, making it easy to place on any bass. It's durable and holds up to the demanding needs of the instrument while offering excellent sound quality. Ear Trumpet Labs is offering a free t-shirt just for Contrabass Conversations listeners with the purchase of a mic. Just visit www.eartrumpetlabs.com/contrabass to claim yours and check out the Nadine. I'm so happy that my course, Beginners Classical Bass, is out in the world on Discover Double Bass, and we've been getting some great feedback. Here's Barry Green, instructor of bass at The Ohio State University, former principal bassist of the Cincinnati Symphony, and author of The Inner Game of Music. Barry writes about the course. This wonderful, extensive course includes 14 chapters of 66 lessons, varying in length from 1 to 8 minutes each. It is so comprehensive. While it is called a beginner's course, this only means that the course begins with the parts of the instrument, including how to take the bass out of the case. However, it also takes the player through the most advanced left and right hand techniques, including shifting, pivoting, harmonics, positions up to the thumb position, tuning the bass, scales and arpeggios, as well as left hand techniques of dynamics, bow placement, articulations, including portato, staccato, and slurring. Barry, thank you so much. And folks, if you haven't checked it out, you can find it through the link in the show notes, or just visit discoverdouble.com/Jason Heath. Yeah, I think you have to. I'm a morning person just kind of by nature, but when I was subbing and doing that sort of thing, it just takes a lot out of you. I definitely. Yeah. That train, Chicago Lyric is really close to the commuter train, and depending on the opera end time, you can catch the good train and be home pretty quick. But if it's a little longer, you have to wait till like the 12:30 train. There's like the 10, and so you knew who was commuting via train because there was like there was like a moment where, like, once the concertmaster stood up or something, you could leave. I don't remember what the rule was, but like everybody who had to catch the train would like crowd by that door, and then the moment you could go, they would just like poof, take off. So
yeah, I think we have some people that repark their cars right before a show, just so they have optimum exit potential. Once the show's done, they can leave and beat all the traffic out because the traffic out's a nightmare.
Yeah,
because the Kennedy Center, they have 3-4 shows going at the same time.
Yeah. And DC is not known for its awesome flow of traffic. Many things it's good for, but I think the traffic it's up there with, just about, the other major metro areas in terms of rough. That's the reputation anyway.
Yeah. I know a couple of people who take beta blockers for the traffic in the area. Yeah.
Well, Donovan Stokes is a friend of mine. He teaches at Shenandoah Conservatory outside and comes in. He used to play more gigs in DC, but I think now he says he'll only take gigs that start after midnight or so. I might be remembering it wrong, but he just like refuses to engage with the DC traffic because it's.
Yeah. I understand that. I don't blame him. Yeah.
Wow. So you're from North Carolina, and you did the School of the Arts for high school. Is that what you did? Paul Sharp, studying with Paul?
Yeah. So, I was born in North Carolina, and my family moved around a lot. We moved back to North Carolina when I was in 7th grade. Mm-hmm. So, I went to the School of the Arts for my freshman year of high school, and my first year there, there was a teacher named Lynn Peters. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of her.
Yeah.
She had taught there for like 40 years. I think she used to be in the Detroit Symphony, but that was her retirement year, actually. So my freshman year, they did the search for a new teacher, and Paul Sharp joined my sophomore year. Yeah. So I stayed with him for 3 years.
Where was Paul before? I just associate Paul with the School of the Arts. Do you remember where he was or what he was doing before that?
Yeah, he was at Texas Tech.
Okay, got it. Okay. I think I knew that at some point in my life, and I forgot. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
He was super supportive. Awesome teacher for me at that time, especially. I came into playing bass pretty green. I had never taken lessons before I went to the School of the Arts. I was just kind of learning the ropes, just real fundamental stuff. I really only played like bass guitar before that. So like my freshman year, Miss Peters, she would grind me on like having bass guitar. I would put my thumb on the E string, kind of how kids play bass guitar. And she just, no, don't do that. Just really like square one stuff. But I think I worked pretty hard in high school, and Paul really encouraged me to do a lot. He made me do the ASTA competition, ISB, and apply to summer festivals that I'd never heard of, and really pushed me to do my best.
Yeah. What did you do summer festival wise when you were in high? Did you do some summer festivals when you were in high school?
Yeah, I did. I did Brevard for 2 summers. Studied with Craig Brown and Sam Cassidy. Not Sam, his dad.
Yep.
Kevin Cassidy. Sorry. Yeah, Sam. I don't know if you know Sam, but he was like in middle school, and he was in the orchestra, just playing along. It was amazing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then I went to Domaine Frege for 2 summers, after my junior and senior year of high school.
Okay, cool.
What I did wah bass.
And you did wah bass too? Okay, yeah. What great environments, wah bass and Domain. What cool places. One of these, I'm in the middle of writing an email to Renan Meyer right now, trying to figure out if I can come out for a couple days. I wish that it was like slightly closer to a major airport. There's things in the Midwest that I would just like drive to back when I lived in Chicago. Now it's like a whole production from California because you got to get somewhere and then but we'll figure it out. And Domain too. I've been meaning to come and bring I've talked with Nick Walker and folks there about like, capturing what's happening there for a couple of days. So, never been. Just talk to people like you that have gone, or a couple of my former students that have gone, but.
Domain at that time really like blew my mind. I had never really like listened much to like Rabath, or I wasn't familiar with the method, and he comes out, Paul Ellison comes out, it's like, for someone who's never been exposed to that, it's a lot.
Yeah.
I remember after my junior year, like the whole following year was just trying to still get those concepts, So it really helped. So I studied with Paul for 1 year in my master's right before I joined here in DC. And it really just helped like solidify that whole experience. It came like full circle with what they were doing at that point. 7-8 years prior was still very relevant, and what I was trying to get with my playing. Yeah, it's awesome. Get out there.
Every time I see Paul Ellison teach or something, I feel like I've like advanced a grade or whatever. It's so that's something that I've seen a lot in master classes and got a chance to spend at least some time with. But it's those like deep lessons. I've lifted an astonishing amount from Paul, given that I never actually formally studied with him. But I've done some teacher in services about stringed instruments and being athletes of the small muscles and those Paul lines. And so actually I have he did a class at the Suzuki Association of the Americas. That was maybe 3 years ago. And Kate Jones, who was coordinating the bass program, had me videotape it. And so I had this teacher in service coming up and actually just watched that over and over and tried to like remember what Paul was talking about. And I did my best Paul. It didn't totally lift. I wasn't totally channeling Paul, but I, heavily influenced.
Oh yeah. So I think he requires the students to videotape lessons. So I still go back every once in a while, and it's still kind of like, oh my God, he's right. Yeah. The most like basic, fundamental stuff, especially.
That's so cool that's like something that people in my generation, I'm in my mid 40s. I don't even remember how old I am. I'm 45 or 46. I can't remember. But like that was starting to happen when I was in college, and people like Bruce Bransby, I think of as kind of like on the cutting edge of that. I remember going and taking lessons with him, and he was having everybody record, and I thought, whoa. And I brought my VHS cassette, wrote on the label Bruce Bransby lesson, put it in there. And I probably lost it at this point, but that's something that like it's so cool that that's become so much more adopted, and it makes sense to me. Like what you get out of that lesson. I mean, there's so much in there. Like, but as you're experiencing it, you can only process so much. But being able to go back and watch it, I was actually talking to Jason Haheim, who's the timpanist for the Met, and he was saying and he was a scientist before he was in the Met, and so he like that's. His whole thing when he's working with students is about finding ways to capture the most information possible and like mine the most data from that information. And it's so cool that you have those recordings. I have so few recordings of my lessons or things like that. And I've gone back every once in a while and checked them out. And it was like, I learn a lot.
I think I started recording my lessons with Ed Barker my senior year. I didn't have a smartphone for my undergrad. I think it was like a graduation gift. My parents got me a smartphone, and then I could start, recording and stuff a lot easier. But up until then, I would just do like photo booth on my like old Mac laptop. So just these huge files, and I still have the laptop like buried because I don't want to lose the files. But
yeah,
it's like figuring it out. I remember he would tell me stories of when he was in college trying to just record his practice. I don't even remember the name of the device. Something kind of like a vinyl. To record yourself. It was like carrying it up the stairs to record his practice. Yeah.
I always think it's weird when I don't really teach these days, but I have people come and play for me occasionally. I've had a couple students off and on the last few years, but I always find it weird when people don't want to record because it's like, and I usually suggest, especially if it's like an adult student coming over, I'm popular in that crowd because people want to like learn and it's like, record it. You can get so much more. Go back and listen because but I think there was a little more resistance to that. I think when I was in school from teachers, like in the early 90s, mid 90s, I remember like asking to record sometimes and people being a little weirded out. And I think I had a microcassette recorder, and then I finally got a mini disc. I was using mini disc like in the mid 90s, which so
that's
funny.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't want to give away their secrets.
It might. Well, I think that there's something to that. I think that there was and especially like an earlier generation than me. I think that there was something to like, it's kind of like you hear about bebop musicians in the 40s, like they'd cover their hands when they're playing the piano because they don't want people to see and try to steal their ideas. And I think the generation, certainly now that we've come into with YouTube and just the problem is not getting the information. There's so much information. It's like it's more like understanding how to synthesize and go through and be led through all that information.
Oh, totally. I think with the pandemic, especially, and in the bass community, there's been like an outpouring of music and sharing and teaching. Yeah, it's a lot to take in now. Where I guess before, especially before, like the internet was just in our lives all the time. You really. That connection with the teacher was something really, really special where it's really only you could get what they were saying and it wasn't broadcast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. And I think that there's room, like maybe I'm just old fashioned, but I don't think I can't imagine anything replacing that one-on-one work with somebody. But I think that all the other information you can absorb, however, I think that just like makes those experiences richer when you actually finally get to work with somebody. Like I think that I've had some conversations with people that are worried, they see people teaching more online or putting out online courses and thinking, oh, you're going to steal all the students from all the teachers. And I think that is not, I understand the fear, but I think that is the wrong way to think about it. You're just like it's just going to bring more questions up and more thirst for knowledge, and anybody who's taught the same dang thing over and over, like if you could record yourself just like getting through the fundamentals and having somebody go through that and then come to you and you don't have to like explain the French bow or the German bow or the shifting technique and have some more interesting topics to dig into. I think I understand the fear, but I think it's nothing but pretty much nothing but positive.
Yeah, I would say even if you watch like a course you may disagree with, that's really influential in a positive way still. You can, it helps you determine what you want to do.
Yeah.
Your playing, your technique and all that.
Yeah.
I think it's great how much stuff is out there, you can learn from it all,
Right, for sure. No, and it's inspiring to me, and yeah, especially during the pandemic. Oh my goodness, how has it been? Besides the obvious like challenges with employment, working in an opera orchestra, like have you been hanging in there? I feel like I've gone through a few peaks and valleys of mental health, and now finally, with at least out here in California, vaccine rates are pretty high. Things are much more open. I'm actually seeing live music, not indoors at Davies, but I'm like, how has this funky year and a half or whatever been for you? Another big question.
This year's been wild. So I think March 2020, around that time when the shutdown happened, I think I took like 3 months off just because I was a little burnt out at that time, and it just kind of happened. I didn't plan on it, but I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. Mm-hmm. Took a healthy amount of time off. And then I started it felt great. It was like rebuilding all those bad habits I was trying to get rid of, especially, playing full time. You develop all these little nicks and habits that you don't really want to be there. Mm-hmm. Maybe some pains that you don't have the time to figure out. Mm-hmm. So it was really good for me to take time off. And then in the summer, my wife and I went on this huge road trip. We actually drove from DC to San Francisco and back over the course of like 6 weeks. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Our dog, Yeah, it was great. And then after that, I started going towards like the Sphinx competition and started really preparing.
I was watching some of that. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you got one of the title prizes, right? Didn't you?
Yeah, I got second and audience choice.
Yeah. Playing Andres Martin's concerto too, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Really cool piece.
Oh, I love yes. Okay, so that was part of this whole year and change too.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, once that was over, it kind of went back to like the same feeling everyone else is feeling of like, what now? what do I do with myself? But yeah, this year I lived with my parents for like 7 months just because save money. So I think a lot of people my age with jobs, people newer to an orchestral job, did that too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like a huge percentage of the San Francisco Symphony bailed out of town. I mean, it's like everybody in New York that I've talked to. It's like I've talked to several people either in the Philharmonic or maybe not the opera. But I've talked to several people based in New York, and it's like everybody. We were working on time zones, and they're like, "Oh, I'm actually in Korea right now." Isaac Tropkis, I just talked to. He's over there. And then Jason Haheim, who I was mentioning, they bailed to the Catskills, I think. So it makes sense. And folks here in the San Francisco Symphony, it's like if the reason why you're here is gone, and DC is one of those crazy cost places like San Francisco too. If you're paying $4,000 in rent, for your share of a 2-bedroom house or whatever, let's get out of here. It's a good decision.
It was the smartest move for us at that moment, and it actually worked out super well because I could use the North Carolina School of the Arts, their recital hall, for my Sphinx stuff. Nice. And I got to teach there for a little bit. Yeah, so it all worked out for the best, luckily.
Now, have you played any of Andres's music before working on the concerto?
No, I ordered like a bundle of it when I got the concerto, and I've been slowly going through it, but I haven't really had a chance to perform it or anything yet. And I haven't had a pianist in town, so I'm just kind of waiting on that stuff, but I would love to play more of it. I see it on YouTube, see other people playing and stuff. I'm into it. Yeah. I saw him and Aaron Olgian.
Yep.
Duo at the last ISB. Yeah, it was super cool.
It's great. I love playing his music so much. I have this very weird Jason problem, which is I do a lot of these bass events, but Andres is usually at those same bass events. So it would be weird for me to play his music. So I've been working on his solo sonata, and I've been working on a few of his other pieces too. And I love it. Actually, there's a piece he wrote, this bass solo and bass duo for this course I have coming out, and it's intended to be for someone who's like an adult beginner, so it's like not too hard. So I can't wait to actually work on some of that with some students, because it's it sits on the bass, and his music is awesome, but it's generally not for beginners, most of it. So yeah,
that's wonderful. That makes total sense to have, like, for people starting the bass, to have something a little more modern than maybe, say, the Capuzzi or something.
Yeah. Well, this was the idea that Jeff Chalmers from Discover Double Bass. This was kind of, we had this idea for just that. It's like, let's do something that's not quite so, dusty as the Capuzzi, and so we got Craig Butterfield, Donovan Stokes, Andres Martin, and then Sam Suggs to all write a solo bass piece that was just a few minutes long, and it was really interesting what everybody came out with. Sam's piece is only in the Rabath third position. It doesn't leave the neck block. And I don't know how familiar you are with any of Sam's music, but like the colors he gets right there, it's like, it is a fascinating piece.
Cool.
Yeah. And then Craig's is all like in the Rabath positions, but it's one of those perfect pieces that sounds way more challenging than it is. And it's it's kind of like a newgrass kind of roots, traditional kind of style thing. And then Donovan's is this like heavy metal sort of thing. So that's been that's been one of my pandemic projects, is like we did all this stuff, and I went over to the UK to film this and work on those things, and then came back March 2020. I've just been sitting here, but I know at some point I'm going to be playing in public again. So I've been like working those pieces and some other pieces up. So I've got this like solo recital that I've been thinking the last year, this will never happen. I'll like never play any of these, but now I'm actually, things are on the calendar. So I'm trying to get ready.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. The few like performances I've done, it's these kind of funny, like college, like nerves that have come back. It's a foreign feeling again, playing for people. It takes some getting used to.
I'll bet. Yeah, it's got. So I have not. You can probably see my bass in the corner there. That bass has not left that front door since March 2020. I remember the last time it left, I was playing one of Andres's pieces. He wrote this bass quartet for like a talented high school level kind of bass quartet. So let's say advanced high school, and it was me and it was 3 other San Francisco freelancers, and we all played it. And we've had a few Zoom calls since then, and finally met up in person. It's like everybody's life took a very weird turn after that. Except I guess my life was already weird, so I'm just kind of doing the same stuff. but yeah, it's got to be interesting. Have you done? So you haven't done? Has the orchestra played in any capacity together since the pandemic, or?
We did some onstage recordings back in April. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, so like just a couple months ago.
Yeah. You had to get tested, masked up, social distant, but yeah, just like 2 weeks of recordings. No audience.
What was it like to get back and actually like do some playing, even if it's kind of weird?
It was great. There's just a lot I hadn't thought about in a long time, like the level of detail in playing with orchestra. Just the most simple things are so important. That you might not necessarily feel when you're playing solo music, just the way, tone quality of a held note, just things like that are so satisfying. It reminded me why I love playing orchestra.
I'll bet. Did you feel rusty at all? Because like I know it. Yeah. Okay.
The lower position, yes. And also this, since orchestras have been playing in a socially distanced setting, the 6 feet apart thing, just being able to hear and play together it's much more challenging for me, at least. I'm just getting used to it.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. It seems so strange to me not having done it, because it's like the opposite of what music's generally is, especially like your job, you're all like crammed together as close as possible in a pit, and then to like have that kind of distance. I mean, that's just that it seems like it must be challenging. And that low position stuff, it's funny, like when you spend a bunch of time just playing by yourself and then you go back to playing with other humans, I've had that feeling. It's like, why can't I play my low G in tune? It's like things I haven't thought about. I definitely have had that rusty feeling. It's probably going to be, to a new exponential factor when I start again.
Yeah. But it's been good. Just having that kind of mentality again. I mean, I think most people play the bass to play with others, know,
right.
Or at least that's kind of, I feel like most people start, that's the inherent nature of it. It's much more collaborative than maybe a piano or a violin,
Right. The old line is, like bass players have conventions, violinists have competitions, right? And I think the supportive nature of the instrument is how I've heard people talk about it. Yeah, like I don't think the personality of somebody that's attracted to bass and what they might be thinking about musically by that attraction, I think it just sort of lends itself to certain outlook. I think that's part of why bass players tend to be so cool, and maybe I'm biased because I spend a lot of time talking to bass players, but you generally see bass sections hanging out, maybe more than others.
I think every time I've subbed with like an orchestra, there's always a hang at some point between shows. Do something. Yeah, I don't see that as much with the other sections.
What did you always envision playing in an orchestra? Like once you got into music, was that like back when you were like that freshman year at the School of the Arts? Like was that kind of the vision you had in mind, or did you think, or was it a little less clear in your mind, or how was that for you?
I think in high school, it's hard to remember at this point exactly what I was thinking, but I just wanted to be good. I had no idea what like kind of career I would have, but I just wanted to be able to play well. And then in college, Ed Barker is very realistic. I think after my freshman year, he was very clear, like, look, if you want to like eat one day, you got to work on these excerpts. He's like, yeah, you're right. I loved studying with him, honestly. I never had like a vision in mind of like what caliber orchestra or anything, especially in school. I just wanted to do something, I have like a pretty blue collar family, like a lot of hardworking people. Just to like be able to put food on the table is like something to be grateful for to an extent, you know. So I just wanted to be able to play music and pay the bills for a while. Yeah, I never envisioned like an opera orchestra specifically or anything, or a specific orchestra. I just wanted to be able to play and be happy doing it for the most, especially in school.
Did your my parents, I don't know if I call them blue collar, but they certainly weren't wealthy. They were both teachers, and there was support, but also skepticism at going to. I went to Northwestern, which is, I got scholarships, but it's not a cheap school, and there was definitely concern for the line of study I was going into. Did you was it like a scary move? And I mean, I guess you were thinking about arts anyway, since you were at the School of the Arts. But my parents, the line was like, "Hey, why don't you go get a music ed degree still?" And of course, like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. After getting a master's in performance, I ended up going and getting a music ed degree later. So I did it like the dumb, expensive way. But did you? How was that for you?
In a weird way, my parents were always very hands off, and I was in boarding school in high school,
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely was just kind of left to my own vices to just pursue what I wanted to. And when it came like senior year to apply for colleges, I never thought about anything else besides music schools. And I guess I'm lucky my parents never even batted an eye at that.
Mm-hmm.
I have like a musical family, so I think they appreciated that, I wanted to do music, which is luckily, it's not like that for everybody. So yeah, they've always been super supportive of me just going for it. And I mean, I'm lucky because it worked out, obviously, but yeah.
Well, it certainly seems to have worked out, and you're a fabulous player, and it's something that I've thought up a lot about, and I've taught, I don't even know how many hundreds of students at this point. I don't know if it's been 1,000, but it's been a lot. And so it's been interesting to watch people's trajectories. And I think I used to be very pessimistic about anybody making it in music back when I was in my mid-20s. That probably didn't help me on the audition circuit, that attitude. But then at the same time as I was super dark on career prospects, and I was even writing a lot about, you have a 3% chance of making it into an orchestra. Even all these young people that I was either working with as private students or at a summer camp or something, I kept seeing people making it work. And I think it's, if you're really cold, hard facts look at, the number of people that want to get an orchestra job versus the number of people that do, it's a tough go. But I also think that, I don't know if I've really seen anybody that really wants to make it in music not make it somehow. And that might not be making it into a professional orchestra, but I have not seen many people. I've more often seen people give up or just move on and find something that's a better fit. So it's tough because I've gotten a lot of parents deeply concerned parents asking about sending their kids to music school. Yeah. And I've gotten more positive about that because I don't know, everything's a risk. And if that's all you were thinking about, right? You wake up and you're fascinated by that. Well, do that. And even if it doesn't work out exactly, that passion and that energy that you put into it and that discipline you have to put into it to work excerpts up like that, that's going to translate over pretty well to anything else. So it's a have you been in the position of giving advice like that?
Not too much. I'm pretty fresh to having full-time students. I have a really small studio right now. I didn't really start teaching until I came to DC, and now it's been online, so that's a whole other thing, obviously. But I mean, if someone's in high school and they don't know what they want, why not just go for it? I'm happy as long as they're doing what they're passionate about. If they don't want to go in music, it's totally fine with me. Maybe I don't think when I was in my early 20s, I would think that, but at this point now it's why wouldn't you do something that makes you happy?
And the trajectory, the more I have worked with people or watch people over the years, the more I've realized never write anybody off or never assume that what that path's going to be. The people that I might not have expected to do incredibly well have done incredibly well, and vice versa. The people I thought had the most promise, they got burned out or got not interested or something. And it's like, I've worked with people where there was like no spark, or not no spark, that sounds mean, but it was music was one of 5 things that they were doing, and all of a sudden it's like they started to take off. And it may have been a little bit of me, it was probably a lot of their peers around them, or getting into different groups, or finding that first domain experience or wah-bass experience. But it's just it's so interesting to watch people's paths as they go through this crazy business.
Oh, totally. I remember when I was in undergrad, my studio at the time, we're all really supportive, and I keep in touch with a lot of these people still, but there was this feeling of like, man, we all suck. We're never going to get jobs. It's kind of hopeless, but we just got to keep doing our best. And now, 10 years later, most of the people have jobs, and, it worked out. But yeah, there's that, especially in the process, the unknowns of it all. Yeah, it can be really daunting for sure.
So you hadn't really taken very many auditions before you landed your current position?
It was my first one. Yeah.
So what? So okay. So this is an interesting thing to me too, because I look back at, I have so many mistakes in my life probably that I've done, but I was like taking auditions like by the time I was a sophomore in college. I thought, I don't know what possessed me to do that, but I was like, and I don't know that was a wise move. And I've noticed, and I don't know if there's a correlation between certain teachers and advice, whatever. I've noticed that some, like, I remember Ira Gold was in his master's, and I might be butchering this, Ira, if you're listening, sorry, but he had taken way fewer auditions than I was expecting, given where he was. He had taken like 1, and he was in his master's, maybe 2, and I might be getting this wrong, but he hadn't taken like 20, and so was that a conscious decision to because if you knew, because some people might think, oh, I'm just going to get out there and audition for everything. Hey, Philadelphia Orchestra's got an audition. I'll take it. I'm 19. Who cares? I'll get the experience. Did you think about that, or were you coached on that or educated on that at all?
So I guess when I took this audition, I had considered others, and I was studying with Ed at the time. And he was, he was a very honest person. And personally, I felt like I just wasn't ready. Mm-hmm. There had been a number of auditions that I probably could have taken and had a good experience, but I just didn't feel like I could win them, Mm-hmm. This is the first one I really pushed myself to take. It seemed really appealing to me for a number of reasons. Granted, I was actually the runner-up for this. Nate West won, and he was here for 2 years. And then when he joined Philly, there's like a rule in the contract. They asked if I want to join, so it all worked out beautiful.
Wow!
But I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I didn't want to do it until I knew I was ready. Mm-hmm. With my preparation, during my time in undergrad, I never got into any festivals. I was really down on myself most of the time with my audition taking. My colleagues and friends, they were getting into Tanglewood and PMF, and I don't think I got to my first festival after my senior year, but I had tried many, many times. Yeah.
What do you think? Was there a moment that, because I mean, those are interesting moments to me, where things are especially the summer festival thing can be particularly discouraging when you're seeing people landing things and you're thinking, what am I not connecting with? Was there an aha moment for you, or did you go to or was it just those incremental gains and all of a sudden it's things start to click?
Honestly, I think I started doing better when I stopped defining myself as much by the whole process. Mm-hmm. It means nothing about someone's character or whatever, how they do it in an audition. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with self-worth. And once I started giving myself a little more respect in that way, I was able to perform much more confidently,
Yeah. Isn't that tricky? It's like something that you're working at, something that it's this competitive thing, but this sort of Zen approach, and taking the emotion out of the result is it seems to be the key for a lot of folks.
I've done much better, ironically, when I mentally prepare myself to not do well at all. You do what you can do. if it doesn't work out, you just got to be ready to accept that at the same time, you know?
Yeah, I think recording helps so much for that, at least in my experience, because you just get used to like what you actually sound like and where you're at. And then realizing, at least for me, that like how I feel about the way something went doesn't necessarily reflect how it went. You know, I mean, like for me, nerves, I don't know how, if nerves were a factor in that, or how that's gone for you. Yeah, for me, it's gotten better. Yeah. Okay. That was a big. You were struggling with that a lot. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah. Crazy.
And I don't know that ever really goes away. Like you're saying now, like it feels weird to like get up and play after like being off the horse for a while during a pandemic. But it's gotten a little better for me as I've gotten older, and as I've like quitting trying to win an orchestra job helped a lot, because I was not. I used to worry that everything was like a reflection of my worth as a player, but it was also a reflection of my worth as a human. And I think something about like just consciously deciding to do something else that seemed to help me psychologically. That was just me.
Yeah. I think that's something we have to figure out more in like the general education of music school. You know, I guess it makes sense, but you know, we got to do something like, it shouldn't be that way where our self-worth is tied to our career that much, you know?
Yeah.
And that's actually something at Rice. I remember Tim Pitts was very clear about that, because I was so worried. Like when I left Rice, you know, there's this feeling you come to a job and it's like, am I done? Like, is this it as far as like what I'm going to do? Obviously you're grateful for a job, but at the same time, you know, you want to be ambitious and keep doing things. It's like, you know, don't be down on yourself if something doesn't go how you want. You know, if you have a bad show, like it's okay. You know, you can't let that stuff affect you too much, you know?
Yeah, I know. It's a tough thing, because I think we at least the musician, you know, my training and folks that I know, like, yeah, we're so hard on ourselves. I was so like, if something didn't go well, like I remember I played the Glière Prelude, those 4 pieces for this thing at Northwestern. And I just ate it. It was like, I don't know what was, I was like a sophomore in college or something. And I felt so bad that I hid in the locker room until everybody had left the building, because I just couldn't imagine looking someone in the eye, like having played that badly. And it's a tough thing, because, you know, you don't want to give everybody a participation trophy for playing out of tune and doing that. I mean, you know, but I think that the mental health aspect of this, and just like being kind to yourself and like figuring out that's something that, it seems like it's one of those things that is not talked about a lot. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand with injury for musicians. That's something that I think people are talking about a little more. And I had a great conversation with Bernardo Russell, Phoebe Russell's husband, he's done all sorts of great stuff. And he went through this crazy injury. And it was just one of those things. And I think a lot of performance injuries come from, it's kind of hard to diagnose sometimes. It's like you're just playing a little too much. This is happening a little bit. You're not, and it's one of those things that because your hands are your livelihood, there's a fear, or your face, you know, for wind players or whatever, there's a real fear to be open about that sort of stuff. And I think that those struggles, it by not being open, it leads to so many more problems, mental, if we're talking, you know, or physical.
Yeah. With practicing, like I remember like my freshman year, I didn't really know how to practice still. A lot of my undergrad was me learning how to practice and listen. But man, I would just practice like an idiot, you know, 6-7 hours, just repeating, not thinking. And I injured myself and I had to take a whole summer off.
Really?
And I feel like I started seeing way more results when I practiced less and just way more concise. You get to the point where it's like, I've done what I can do for today. I can't make this any better for today, and you sit on it. And it's been way more productive for me, and you know, gives you time to explore other interests as well, obviously.
Right. That's and you hear all these stories of the like toughing it out in the practicing for 5 or 6 hours a day. I remember it's like, oh, Mark over there, the cellist, he practices 6 hours a day. Whoa, look at Mark.
Yeah,
like,
it's very college.
yeah, right, exactly. And you have like all this. You have the luxury, but the curse of having all this time to do with as you please. For me, I've gotten much better. I almost like play games with myself with practicing. It's like I have to quit by 5 no matter what is my current game. And it's like, I'm amazed at how much more I get done when I put this restriction. It's like, all right, I might start at 3:45. I have to be done with everything by 5. That's it. And, just imposing that limit, whatever that limit might be for somebody, that seems to have worked well for me in just like actually working on what needs work versus like perseverating on whatever,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It does feel good once I guess learning how to practice is a journey in itself, and that never ends.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a nice feeling when you sort of hit your mental capacity for the day, which could be, anywhere from 20 minutes to X hours. It's like, okay, I've done the best I can do for today. Let's set it down. And you start from like a great place the next day, instead of like this, anxiety of like, I don't know, am I going to do it right today? If you overspend yourself.
That's something I remember Alex Hanna talking with me about back when I was talking about him getting his Chicago Symphony job, because he was principal of Detroit before that. I hope I'm remembering this right. And then Chicago, he was just very sensitive to if he was feeling burned out that day. And he had this routine, but he like if anything felt a little bit off, he's like, I'm just going to take a half a day. I'm just going to like do this. I'm going to go do something fun and just try to like, yeah. And so just it's my takeaway was he was just being very sensitive to any sort of indication of burnout in the whole process and just trying to like feel good going in. Because he was one of those people for that audition, at least, that had a very meticulous like 5 months out plan of what to do. And I know some people are like that and some people are less like that, but
it makes sense for a position like that, for sure. Totally get that.
Yeah, and if you talk to Alex about auditioning, it's like, whoa, this is a focused human. It's like talking to Michael Phelps, preparing for the Olympics or something. But still, even with that whole like being sensitive to how you're feeling and making sure that things are feeling good and things are feeling fresh, and you're not just like burning yourself into the ground.
I've certainly done better too, having like a game plan. I haven't done like a 5 month, but as much as I can, just have some sort of trajectory on how I want things to go with the preparation. With an audition, I haven't really, I don't really try to perform anything until not too soon before the big day. I do much better in the abstract of like just practicing single notes for a month, just trying to understand the music I want and then working on the performance aspect after. But that needs like heavy planning, or else you are not going to be ready in time,
Yeah, no, it's cool, and it's one of those things that I think if your one's initial thought might be, oh, let's get this as performance ready as quickly as possible. But I think folks that seem to have, if you can take that more meticulous, like not worrying about putting all the pieces together approach, that seems to oftentimes result in a greater final product. I remember bringing up Ira Gold again back in, we were playing in this chamber orchestra together, and we were playing, I don't even know, it was like Mendelssohn. Maybe Mendelssohn 3 or something like that. And or maybe it was something. No, I think it was maybe even like a Haydn symphony. It was something that was like tricky, but it wasn't like, and I'd sort of like banged away at the bass part for a little bit before I came to rehearsal. And Ira said, I took this apart and I went real slow. And I spent, a bunch of time just thinking about this string crossing. And, I just started slow. And he was like describing how he put it together. I thought like, wow, he has given this so much more thought than I have. I just like, can I play it at tempo? Kind of, or maybe I'll slow it down a little bit and then try it. But even with something that was like one piece out of many on a 1 week of orchestra, he'd like given some thought to that. So it's interesting.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. I see him around a fair bit since we work in the same building.
Yeah.
We have like kind of an equivalent education with Ed Barker and Paul Ellison.
Yeah.
We bonded over that a lot.
I'm sure. Yeah, it's quite a cohort that you've been in. Those are some, but it's cool that it's also, I think it's cool to hear that even somebody who hadn't studied or spent time around Ed Barker or that bass studio, they might just think that everybody's feeling like a monster player from the moment they get there. And it's nice to hear that even in a studio like that, everybody was worried that they weren't going to get a job and thought that they weren't adequate. And
I don't think anyone in my studio took auditions. Like my time there, it was very rare because no one felt like they would do well. I think that was just kind of the mentality at that time. I don't know about now, but I think the education there is amazing. It was exactly what I needed, and it's been good for me because it's more of a long-term trajectory. We definitely talked about auditions, and rep class was extremely intense, of course, and we took orchestra very seriously. But it wasn't really focusing on taking auditions at that moment. It was focusing on just understanding the music and just creating the best product that you could. It wasn't really about the career as much as just like understanding music as a whole. And that's been great for me because it's helped me just keep going, stuff I can keep working on. Because I feel like if your goal is to just get a job, once you hit your goal, it's like, I don't know, you see those people in orchestra that are like, they're just upset to show up to work at that point, but if you have like a higher, calling to the music rather than just, the income or whatever, it helps you keep going.
Yeah, you're on a long journey, and full-time employment may be a part of that journey, but it seems like the most inspired people, and that's so interesting when you look at orchestras or musicians that have been there for a while, and who seems to have that spark still, and who maybe not so much, and so many of the people that still have that spark, they have something. They almost always have something on the side. Oftentimes music, but maybe something outside of like Charles Chandler here in the San Francisco Symphony is a wonderful example. He and Amos Yang, who's I believe assistant principal cello of the symphony, they have this cello bass duo, and they have music commissioned for them, and they play. They rehearse a ton, and they're like, they just poured all this energy into that duo, and they're just absolute monsters. And I can think of a bunch of other examples. Brian Marcus, who's been in the symphony, I think 40 years here. He's really into teaching into Feldenkrais and so it's just interesting seeing people and he seems to be having as much fun playing as he probably did decades ago, and Dan Smith joined the orchestra, and there's another German bow player now in the orchestra, and he's so excited to and so it's just kind of cool to see people who really are lifelong learners and are excited about that, and not everybody's like that, but I find it inspiring to see people at all points in their career that still kind of have that mentality.
Yeah, totally. I'm lucky that my teachers were very much like that. Paul Sharp, Ed Barker, and Paul Ellison. They're all still doing their projects, and you see Paul, he's still doing great.
Yeah,
strong at Rice, and Ed Barker's still doing recitals. I remember once he played the Harbison Concerto with orchestra with 3 weeks notice, just like, oh my God.
Yeah. Those are good examples. And those are other folks like Francois Rabath playing, he's 90 now. I think Gary Carr is 80 and still playing. And that's one of the cool things about music is you can keep going like that. And what good role models. Christian, the next time you do a road trip out to San Francisco, hit me up. Come hang out.
That'd be great. I love that.
Yeah, for sure. And I will certainly be in your neck of the woods sooner rather than later. I was supposed to be in D.C. March 2020 for the Maryland Educators Association. I guess it was going to be in Baltimore, but I would have been in D.C. and then that didn't happen. Yeah. So, but I'll let you know when I'm in town. It'd be great to meet up. Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Christian, can't wait to chat with you more. Do a round 2 in person would be even better, but I'm a fan of you and what you're doing, and just really cool to see someone like you at the beginning of your career. Not at the beginning of your career, you have a job, but early in the career, and there's a lot more career ahead of you, so can't wait to check you out. I don't know why I'm talking specifically to Christian. I guess I am. But thank you, folks, beyond Christian, of course, for listening to this. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Maybe this is your first Contrabass Conversations. It's quite possible. If so, if you go to contrabassconversations.com, our website, you will find a massive, I guess might be a word for it, archive of over 800 conversations at this point. I can't believe I've done that many. If you would like to dip your toe into the waters of this vast archive, the website's one way to do it. Another way might be our app, contrabassconversations.com/app, or just look up Contrabass Conversations. How many times can I say those words in this outro? In your app store of choice, and you can find that. And that's a really good way to get into topics. So if you go on and you type jazz, you will see every episode where we dig into jazz. If you type in spiccato, you'll find episodes on spiccato. You'll find all sorts of stuff you can download. You can organize them in different ways. And it's just a good way to get into the archive if you want to use it maybe as a research tool. That sounds kind of boring, but that might be one way to do it. And obviously, Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify or however you listen to podcasts, you can get it there as well. I am doing the fourth of these 4 outros as I sit down. I'm just about to dig into this footage for Wabase and for the Roboth Institute. That's going to be the bulk of the rest of my week, or who knows how long it'll take to get some stuff out for that. There will probably be some of that content coming out on the podcast. There will absolutely be content from that coming out on YouTube, coming out on Instagram, coming out on Facebook. Wherever you hang out, if you look us up, you will find us, and you'll be able to connect with that content and other live events, because live events are back, apparently. Yes. And I will be at an increasing number of them and covering them and bringing them to, or the essence of them, or some lessons learned from them, or folks that were featured there, to you via the podcast and also via our email newsletter. If you're not on that, you might want to sign up. All that, I'm pointing you to so many things today. Jason, why am I doing that? Contrabassconversations.com is the hub. So I'd love to connect with you, obviously here on the podcast in the long form audio, video, if that's your jam, at YouTube and any social media platform that you're using, we are likely there. So I will close out and thank the team, who are Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Mitch Mooring, and Trevor Jones. Mitch makes beautiful basses in Kilgore, Texas, just east of Dallas-Fort Worth. Learn more at mitchmooring.com. I am your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.